All right, welcome everybody. It is Sunday, and that means that we are here talking about a particular platform piece. And this week's topic is student loan forgiveness. This is an issue that I know affects a lot of our families, including my own, and is one that I'm hearing a lot, particularly from students, unsurprisingly, as I'm out there on the campaign trail, but also from a lot of older folks that have been out of school for a while. So it seemed like an important issue to be addressing. So I want to give you a little bit of story background that kind of feeds into how I'm thinking about this. And that is that my husband and I took a medical tourism trip last spring to Mexico. And we were in a border town, and the hotel was about the same price as it would have been in the US. The food was almost the same price, maybe a little less expensive, but the medical care itself was a fraction of the cost. It was so much less that paying for a week-long trip to Mexico was a way better deal than trying to get our needs met in the US. And one of the big differences is that in New Mexico, tuition at public universities is free. Doctors and dentists are not coming out of school in hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt the same way that they are in the US. So student debt has ripples into our economy and into people's well-being in many, many different ways. So part of why I support full student loan forgiveness is the potential ripples that that has on medical costs and other professional services in the US. Part of why doctors' fees are so high is that doctors are typically paying off hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans. Same thing with lawyers, same thing with a lot of professionals. So forgiving $50,000 worth of debt, as Elizabeth Warren and some other folks have proposed, will certainly help a lot of people. But many of us are carrying higher student loan burdens than that. About 7,600,000 people would still have student debts after that plan was fully implemented. So ultimately, my goal is for public education in the US to be free. So we do this with public K through 12 schools, and this has been an incredibly beneficial thing to our development as a country. Whatever problems there are with our public education system, and there are certainly problems with it, having everyone have a minimal level of education is good for us as a society. It's good for businesses, and it is good especially for people themselves. It is a lot harder to pursue happiness, to reference sort of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those core American values, if you can't read and you can't get a decent job and you're unable to do what you need to do to get yourself educated in the way you want to get yourself educated. So I believe that trade schools, community colleges, and four-year public universities should all be free for qualified students. And it's really important to me that we include trade schools in that list because trades are in many ways the core of our economy. And I also happen to despise work snobbery. So I had a student when I was a graduate assistant many years ago at Eastern Michigan University, and I was teaching freshman comp. And this guy came into my office one day, literally in tears. He was really struggling with my class and was still getting a D. And he was really beating himself up about it. And as we talked, his story came out, and turned out that both of his parents were professionals, and they had this really strong thing about all their kids needing to go to college and get a degree. And I finally asked him, well, what do you want? And this guy lit up and started talking about how much he loved engines, and this was literally the only time that I ever saw this guy get really animated. He wanted to be an auto mechanic, but that wasn't really good enough for his family. So this kind of like anti-trades snobbery is really hard to see. I mean, if you drive a car or ride a bus, you need to value mechanics. If you live in a house or apartment, you need to value plumbers. If we are serious about creating an economy that works for everyone, and that's really my big picture goal with a lot of this, we need to get past this idea that working in the trades is less, sort of somehow less than working in academia or working so-called professional work. And so it's important to me that when we get into talking about free public education, that we include trades and we include community colleges in that and aren't just thinking about four-year institutions. So student loan forgiveness makes a lot of sense from a lot of angles, but especially in the context of wanting public education at all levels to be free. So before I get into the stats, I want to address one of the more frustrating arguments in this whole thing. The argument that full forgiveness and free education would also give free stuff, which I hate the framing of in general because it's our tax money that we're talking about, it's not free, but that it would give free stuff to rich kids. And that argument, I think, is of limited value in real time and space. If we are going to not do the right thing for 99% of us because 1% might get some benefit as well that maybe they don't deserve, we are doing some very bad societal math when we make those kinds of arguments. And so I really want to encourage us to see it being just fine that we would have economic diversity in our college classes in the same way that we have economic diversity in most of our public schools in K through 12 right now. So let's look for a couple minutes at the statistics on student debt. So the total amount of outstanding student debt is about $1.61 trillion. So that is a lot of money. And that means two things. One of them is a lot of impact that's happening on real people, but also it's a pretty big bill, and that's the thing that a lot of people are focusing on. So I want to say that this is a much smaller bill, though, than we have spent on bailing out big businesses just in the last month or so. By some estimates, that number might get as high as $4.5 billion before this is over, and there's a number of additional expenses tacked on top of that. One of the most interesting things to me is that both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are on the bailout list. So that's right. So we're bailing out loan companies that hold most of our student loans in this country, but we're not bailing out the people with loans. It seems like we could have had that same amount of money run through individuals first and have their student debts wiped out. But instead, we just went directly to supporting those businesses. And this is about priorities. Whose survival are we willing to put our tax money into? It seems like the answer right now is big businesses rather than people. And there is really no reality behind claims that we don't have the money to do this, as evidenced by the last month. And it is a lot of people who would be directly benefiting from student loan relief. So 44.5 million people have student debts right now. That is 13.6% of the US population. We all know people who are struggling with student debt. Of those people, 5.1 million are in default currently, and another 2.6 million are in forbearance. So a huge number of people couldn't pay this bill before the coronavirus hit, and it is expected that many, many more will be defaulting this spring and summer. So essentially what that means is that we have a setup where we are punishing individuals for a combination of an economic system that already wasn't working for them and a pandemic. And if it seems like this is just a young person's issue, 8.4 million of those people who currently still owe on their student debts are over 50 years old. So at this point, what we have is many families, my own included, that have multiple generations of people with student debt. So something about this isn't working. It's not like you go to college and it takes you 3 years to pay off your debts or something, and that's manageable for people. We have people going into retirement who are still trying to pay off their student loans. Now, plenty of people are also arguing that we have loan forgiveness programs in place. But if you do a little bit of looking into it, they aren't actually providing that much relief. So one such program is called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and it has some incredibly depressing statistics. These are the numbers from 2018. So the total number of applications in 2018 that they got were 49,669. The number of those applications that got approved and somebody actually got some student loan forgiveness out of it were 423. So that's less than 1% of applications are actually getting anything out of it. And while some of those applications are sort of still caught in going around in circles and trying to get through the paperwork, 32,409 of them are have actually been denied outright. And this is largely a Betsy DeVos problem, but she's able to do that with the support of a whole system that really doesn't value student loan forgiveness. So all these stats are good to know, but what seems to be more interesting in some ways is the stories of people who are suffering about being deeply in debt and are, some of them, avoiding college altogether. So I know young people who I've talked to who are brilliant and would probably be doing really well in college, and they are questioning whether the value of a degree is worth the debt, given how bad their job prospects are. Some are choosing not to go altogether, and then that stress of student loan debt is just sort of substituted for a different kind of stress with not being qualified to do anything beyond really low wage work. And what about people who are never going to be labeled brilliant, but just really want to learn something? I think those folks ought to be able to go to college as well. And the thing is that student loans generally can't be discharged through bankruptcy in the US. There's some exceptions to that, but that is the rule. So imagine that for a moment. Things are tough enough in your life that you go through the shame-inducing process of bankruptcy. And our capitalism-tied culture tells us that failing economically is a horrible failure. And so you go through all of that, and at the end of it, you are still thousands of dollars in debt because of your student loans. So basically, the big companies that own almost half of our student debts have us in a very, very tough place right now. The whole system is corrupt, and it is all profit-driven. And to me, that is one of the best reasons of all to support a full student debt forgiveness program. So that's what I've got to say about this. I would love to have some conversation here with Glenn, who's with me today. Glenn, you had wanted to talk a little bit maybe about graduate students. What's on your mind?
Yeah, thank you so much, Yana. Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, something that's been in the news recently has been cost of living adjustment, the COLA movement, especially in University of California. And the University of California, Santa Cruz actually fired 54 of their graduate workers just a few weeks ago for striking and demanding basically that they just get paid enough money to live in one of the most expensive parts of the entire country. Right, and from personal experience, so I'm a teaching assistant at the University of Wyoming, and my stipend is just around the $12,000 mark, which is actually under the federal poverty guidelines. Right, and because I'm an international student on a visa, I'm actually not allowed to work any more hours during term time. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on, making sure that graduate students get paid a fair wage, just simply enough to live off. I don't think these demands are particularly huge. It's just like, can we just teach and work and study without, being seriously stressed about money basically every day? And I was just wondering how you would voice that in the Senate.
Well, I mean, my sense is like, I want everybody to be making a living wage, and I don't think there should be exceptions to that. And there are unfortunately a lot of exceptions to that. Even minimum wage laws have exceptions, let alone people making living wages. So I absolutely support the COLA movement. I think it's important that cost of living be taken into account, and it's one of the reasons why I actually like what are called living wage laws rather than minimum wage laws that are actually based on the cost of living in your local area. And so if you're on a $12,000 excuse me, stipend, so that means like $1,000 a month that you're expected to live on, right?
Yes, I get after taxes, it's around 1,200, and that is it.
Yeah, and so that doesn't work, just about anywhere. I mean, I don't know where that ends up being a livable wage, but particularly when we have these, situations then where some people like yourself, being an international student, can't work another job, and sometimes we have people who are graduate students. I know several graduate students who are dealing with chronic illness issues, and they can't really do their schoolwork, do their graduate assistant work, and have another job on top of it. And so, it's not only folks like you who are sort of, blocked from being able to do that, but a whole lot of other people as well. And, our university system, I think, has been, steadily devolving for a long time to the point where it relies really heavily on grad students. And part of why it does that is because y'all don't have to get paid very well under the current situation, and that saves universities a lot of money, and in some cases allows the higher ups in the university to get their raises while education is kind of crumbling around us. And we're relying on a lot of really stressed out young people to prop up our public education system, and that doesn't make any sense to me.
And just one more thing. So exactly as you said, so there's been a rise in graduate students, but simultaneously there's been a drop in tenure positions available after graduation.
Right.
What are your thoughts on PhD students, spending 5-6 years working, and then the job market has shrunk so much they're struggling to find work? How can we figure that out?
Well, I mean, I do think that we need to go back to a system that has well-paid, full-time, secure employment for people in academia, because I think that's the other side of it, is as we rely more on grad students, that we're doing that at the expense of having actual secure jobs. And I know a number of people who have PhDs who either haven't been able to find a position at all and are not in academia and are I mean, I know people who are flipping burgers who have PhDs. So sometimes it's really, really bad. And I also know people who are employed, but like one of my friends in North Carolina has been working simultaneously at 3 different universities, and he's like an adjunct at multiple different places, trying to piece together, a living, enough money to be able to make it work. And so he's teaching like 2 classes each at multiple different universities, instead of having like a 4 or 5 class load, or like a 3 class load in a research position or something like that. And so I think there's a lot of reform that needs to happen, and a lot of it is going back to some of the systems that we had before that were actually less less reliant on adjuncts. I mean, they're kind of in well, not a worse position, but almost as bad of a position, I feel like, as a lot of our GAs are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think there's a whole package of stuff there that we need to be doing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, everybody. So so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you for being here with me today, Glenn. I appreciate it. And we will see folks on Thursday on Facebook Live, and back here next Sunday at 1 o'clock for another one of these sessions.